Welcome to Unbound. You're here for conscious chats that go deeper than your Instagram feed, where we ditch the dogma but keep it real. So let's get unbound. On relationships.
Oh, the most fun topic of all.
The one that causes the most strain, the most questions.
The one that is so captivating, so alluring.
Yeah.
Okay, where do we even start?
Well, I think I really want to talk about it from the spiritual perspective. Like, what is the spiritual purpose of relationship? Because where we've got to is quite a lot of indoctrination around the value of relationships, particularly even patriarchy, the value of a woman in a relationship more so than out of a relationship particularly, and this whole setup that we've had, particularly through growing up with Disney movies, and every movie is about the ultimate point is getting together ideally between a woman and a man and then living happily ever after. And that programming is causing people a lot of problems because that doesn't tend to be how life works out for almost everyone. It's not the happy ever after that you assumed it would be. It didn't solve all of your problems. In fact, you need to become even more accountable in relationship if it's going to work, if it's going to be relevant over the long term. And so stepping away from that programming and the ideas around what relationships should be about based on society and historical context into what is the actual purpose of it, which is, this opportunity to get to know yourself deeper, to experience yourself in relation to another in a real deep sense of intimacy, and ultimately a vehicle for growth. So we think it's a vehicle sometimes in early stages of evolution for saving us, to export my happiness. So I'll meet this person and they're going to make me happy. And the problem with that is we find that that isn't the case. Even in relationships that are really working, they're not going to make you happy all of the time. And that's a burden of responsibility that we shouldn't really put on another person. That's when the relationship starts to get heavy. It starts to feel like a drain because one person, or in a codependent dynamic, both people are straining so much outside of themselves to try to please another, to try to solve another's problems, rather than allowing the person to be who they are, to support their happiness and understand what it is that supports it and what it is that takes away from it. And to really open yourself up to a deeper layer of growth, which is this person is going to be a reflection to you of, just like a child is, like lots of the different experiences that we have in life. The more intimate the relationship, and we don't get closer than an intimate partnership, the more intimate that partnership, the more it's going to reveal to you. And that can be one of the barriers to actually having a relationship that is nourishing, that is sustainable over the long term, is because you're not prepared to, or capable, or one of you is not able to, willing or able to handle that level of growth, or handle that level of reflection, or handle it in a way that is loving and kind and accepting and compassionate, because those are all the qualities that are going to be needed ultimately for this deeper relationship. And this is the only kind of relationship that is really going to last over the long term. And I don't think we can measure the success of a relationship by its longevity. But if we are looking to have a more sustained relationship, which would naturally, be the ideal, just through the sense of, rather than going in and out of them all the time, we can actually do the bulk of the learning inside of one and grow very deeply with one person, though that's not always the pathway, then it's going to need to be all of those things. But that's not really the way that we've been brought up to see relationships.
And we're so fascinated by what's happening in our personal relationships. Like, I saw this meme on Instagram the other day where it said two professional women politely asked each other for their careers for 5 minutes before getting on to who they were dating, or something like that.
Yeah, totally.
And I do find this quite an annoyance when I'm spending time with my friends who are all fascinating, dynamic people. And we do that. We politely ask about what's going on with our, work and our jobs and our children or whatever. And then we talk about, and then the rest of the conversation is what's happening in our relationships.
Well, it's usually a bit juicier, isn't it? There's usually a bit more of a dramatic storyline.
Yes.
I think particularly if you are dating, which has been kind of recent for you, more on the dating rather than being in long-term partnership more recently. So there's going to be...
I've tried it all.
Yeah. You've been across the whole spectrum, as have I. You're going to be more... There's going to be a lot more going on than there is necessarily in your workspace at the time, right?
Yeah, which I guess is more consistent.
Yes, for you. So it might swap around for someone else who's been in a really long-term relationship. Then maybe the juices in the
workspace.
Yeah,
yeah. We do enjoy a bit of the drama, and people are so fascinating, and how they, I guess, also what they bring up in us, because I've spent, I was married for 8 years, in that relationship for 11 years. I unsubscribed from that. I then spent some time on my own. Then I dated. Then so I spent some more time on my own. I really have tried it all, trust me. And that, I think in the last phase of time that I spent on my own, I got to some really deep places in myself, sort of working through a lot of things in myself. And then I ultimately ended up in a very peaceful, contented, easy space. And then when I thought, look at me, I've done it.
I'm killing it live.
I'm killing it.
I've
got to this space where nothing's really coming up anymore. And then I started dating again. I'm like, triggered, and then you discover that those things are still there. And I suppose that is one of the dramas that we go through, is that once we start interacting with someone, they will bring things up in us that wouldn't otherwise have been brought up had we not been relating to somebody else.
Yeah, and it really comes down to, because love and connection are on the line in that setting, it's so much more of a high stake way than it is when you're on your own, because you're going to stay relatively connected, relatively accepting of yourself to the degree that you've got there. But when there's another person, the chance for disconnection, for abandonment, for lack of acceptance, for losing this love that you perceive as outside of yourself is much higher. So it brings everything up to the surface. And even, it's very interesting, and we'll get onto this in another episode, the astrological chart and the supreme wisdom of how the ways that the planets interact. We look at the setup of the houses. The first house is you, and the seventh house, which sits opposite that, is the partner in his relationship. So it's directly reflecting. It's the house that's directly opposite. So it has a direct reflection on you, which means it impacts you significantly, and it's also a reflection of you. So having this understanding, which is really what you're speaking to, is you learned a lot through relationships, and then you progressed and you also worked a lot on yourself and healed a number of things and regulated your system. And so the type of relationship that you're then going to attract or be reflecting back onto you is going to be more healthy. It's going to reflect more of that stage of where you're at, but also show you, hey, here's some other areas, which is what life is doing in every arena. But I think with relationships, we tend to export it to be the other person's responsibility. It's all about them. They are doing this. They made me feel like they did this, they did that. It's all them, when we can only ever be, really in relationship with self. So it's showing us always, just at a deeper way, what is still there to work on. And it's a great gift like that, because there's a certain layer of growth that happens primarily in relationship. Now, some people will be on a pathway where the primary relevance in their life right now is to be growing and evolving on their own, which also can be a very expansive and accelerated path, because there isn't another person that you have to consider in that piece, where you have to consider their needs and preferences, and you're spending time with them, and that's not time that you're able to work on yourself or really dig deep into those layers. That sometimes some solo time is very relevant. So having the single pathway is also a really deep powerful pathway of learning to really connect with self and then taking that into relationship, because we see that mirroring of the house. What is your relationship to yourself is going to show up in the relationship with another, and there just is no way around it. That's why it's sitting. It's not to the side. It's not in one of the other positions. Could be anywhere in the chart. Why is it directly opposite the first house, which is you? Is because it reflects your relationship with you. How you are with yourself is how you will be in intimate partnership. So what it's really showing you when all of those things come up is what parts of relating to yourself have you not yet healed? And what love do you still feel that you deserve? Because you may be stuck in dynamics where you're holding on to low-grade versions of what you think that you deserve based on stress and trauma and what was mirrored to you, what kind of relationships were mirrored to you in early childhood. And so then you're accepting that dynamic because it's familiar, but it's still being shown to you, and the opportunity is, do I evolve out of this dynamic either with the partner or without them if they're unable to? If you're unable to together evolve out of it, sometimes the way we evolve out of it is out of being out of it. Either you're going to do that or you're going to stay in the cycle. And so there's always that opportunity is there. It's just, what is our willingness and capacity? Willingness to shift, awareness. We need to be aware that that dynamic isn't healthy and isn't supporting us enhancing life. A relationship should enhance in the direction of growth as well. It's not all easy, but the challenge, the effort is worthwhile effort. It's not effort that consistently is draining you and it's making you feel stressed and anxious and exhausted all the time and not like yourself and moving away from yourself. It's effort that rewards you with greater unity, greater acceptance, greater compassion, greater adaptation within a relationship setting. When the effort is leading you in that direction, then it's very rewarding. So it's life enhancing. So we're wanting to cultivate that kind of dynamic. And so we need to have that awareness, oh, that isn't the dynamic that I've got right now, where there will be a sense something is wrong, and it's about getting clear on what isn't quite right. Is it the person? Is it the dynamic? Is it me, the way I'm showing up? Where does the responsibility lie in this mirroring process? And then, do I have a willingness to change that? Because sometimes we're just like, no, I don't want to do anything. It's too hard to change. It's too uncomfortable. I might risk losing something. When we can never really lose something, we know it's all inside of ourselves, and who we interact with is really always going to be a reflection of that. And then capacity. I might be willing. Partner might be willing, but doesn't have the capacity. So sometimes you're willing and your capacity is higher. Your capacity for change is greater than your partner. And so they're not able to move at the rate that you are, to expand at the rate that you are. And there can be a gap, but if the gap is too big, what's going to end up happening is you're going to evolve essentially out of the relationship, which isn't a bad thing, because we don't want to hold back our evolution to stay with someone or in something, anything, relationship or otherwise, to not rock the boat or to stay small or to stay and cling on to something that we've actually evolved past. And we can move out of it with love and gratitude for the experience that we had for a while, that was relevant for a while, but also recognize that what's really relevant right now is where we're going, who we're becoming. And through all efforts, this person is unable to meet you there. And it's not going to be satisfying to relate in the way that they're capable of at that particular time.
And I feel like the general populace doesn't think about relationships as being kind of vehicles for growth and evolution. They think about relationships being for pleasure, connection, company, of which they are too.
Yes.
But that it should feel good, that the other person should make you feel good, that it should feel nice, that it should feel pleasurable all the time. And I'm aware of, there's relationships that have I don't want to use the word failed because that's just become irrelevant.
Yeah.
There's relationships that have become irrelevant to continue because of that mirroring aspect. And I know that, when someone's been with me and then they've seen parts of themselves that make them feel uncomfortable, that they don't actually want to look at, that they've ended it because of not being able to cope with that aspect of it. And it's and missing the whole point about, hey, this is bringing up an opportunity for growth.
And it's going to take, a high-grade person who's got a level of awareness and maturity in order to be at that space. And that's really where you are. So that's what you're calling for. So anyone that's not in alignment with that it's going to end some way from whoever does the ending. It doesn't matter who does the ending. That's just ego. I ended it. They ended it. It was mutual. It was mutual. It really doesn't matter who ended it. Sometimes the relationship has been ended for you by the other person who cheated or who went off somewhere and did something, and you might be like, get caught up in the storyline, right, of why it ended and who ended it. But really, it was just meant to end, because if that is the type of behavior or dynamic that whether they acted on it or not, the potentiality was there because they had that capacity within them to go and do something like that. It was always there. The dynamic was always there. That it usually is not the first time. There was some other thing that happened. Conversations, flirting, texts, who knows what else went on prior to that. So you've now been evolved out by nature's intelligence of something that clearly wasn't worthy of you, and that gives you an opportunity to find something that is. If we're stuck in something that's not aligned, then we're never going to get that opportunity. And it might take a while for that to come around, and there might be other experiences that come and go in the meantime. But it's only when we're hyper attached to needing to be in a relationship all the time in order to be happy, to be of value, to, be doing the right thing in the world, to be wanted, to be accepted, whatever it might be. And if we're finding those things that are coming up, then we're going to need to, that is a reason why we're single right now, to also see this reflection of me. In this scenario, what I'm seeing is I don't feel worthy without a partner, which can come up for women. Or I feel like I'm not wanted. I've been left on the shelf. I haven't been chosen. All of those things, they're opportunities for us to go deeper with our connection with self, because we're always relating. And this also is a really important piece that I want to share for the single people listening to this, which is we're always relating. We're always relating to self. We're always relating with nature, with all aspects of existence. But when we hyper-focus on one style of relating, which is intimate relating, we can just be so focused on that. I need a partner. I'm not in a partner. They've got a partner. They've got a partner. They're having kids because they've got a partner, and I don't have it, and so I'm not wanted. And you're missing this whole other aspect of your experience. And if you don't feel wanted in your own life without a partner, that's going to be a red flag for the type of partner that you'll attract, because there will be some kind of trauma bond there. They'll have some match for that inside themselves, which is going to bring up unhealthy dynamics at some point. Now, that may also be the pathway for healing that on both sides. But if it's showing up for you when you're alone, this is your opportunity to go deeper within yourself and to see what is the root cause of that, to heal that, and then find yourself in a much more freer relationship that's not codependent, that's interdependent, that allows us to experience the things that you mentioned, which is pleasure, joy, connection, company, shared experience. We can share our experience with ourselves. One thing that over the last I've been single 10 years, maybe there's a couple of relationships in there, here and there, but a lot of single time after my divorce. And one thing that I have really been able to move through is a great gift of that time is the sense where I always had this sort of virus chewing away at my experience, which was always, it would be better if I could share this with someone. Mm-hmm. I'm happy in my own company. I got to that point and I was really enjoying, but I'd love to talk to someone about the movie I saw. I'd love to talk to someone at dinner. I'd love to share this amazing sunset. But it was just this idea, again, not necessarily reality, that this experience would be better with another. And I started to really explore that. And I was like, that is cutting me off. That belief system is cutting me off from deepening and enriching this experience that I'm having right now. So I decided to just delete that programming and go beyond it. And what it opened up was just that mental chatter was gone. That part of me that wasn't present, that was still why I call it a virus, because it's chewing away at the fullness of the experience in the background. And I lent into sharing it with myself, which means true deep presence of just being in it and not having an overlay of this would or could be better with another, because it might not. They could be annoying. They could be
they could chew with their mouth open.
Stressed and, they're not noticing the sunset. They want to move on to some other thing, or they're talking about a topic that's entirely uninteresting to you. There's so many realities that come of having another person. They may not have a preference to do the same thing as you, and so you're on your own anyway. All these ideas of what it would be better like, rather than being deeply present and engaged with yourself. Yourself is the primary relationship. Again, when we look at the astrological chart, the first house is you. The first house is not the partner, 7th house. The first house is you. Primary relationship is with yourself. But we often miss that in favor of the indoctrination. And this is where a lot of people will abandon themselves in favor of the preferences of another, in favor of letting go of all these values that they might hold, preferences, to be in and stay in something with someone that isn't really truly aligned, because you're having to abandon this, abandon that, and suddenly you're so far away from yourself. And of course, that relationship will not last because it's not aligned. It can't have relevance over the long term. So something will end it. If it's not you, it will get ended by something, or in the very rare case, people are just so stuck in the suffering, they can manage to sort of stay in there even though the walls are closing and all the signals are this should have ended, but they're willing to undergo that level of suffering, then they may stay together right till the end. And you might have some people in the older generation that you see that are still doing that. But cycling back to your question, these people that, you meet and then they get cycled out of your experience, which is they disappear, they ghost you, they whatever, great, fantastic. Willingness and capacity aren't there, which I think are great words to kind of keep in your awareness when you're engaging, when you're dating, to see we can quite often project our own values, our own intentions, our willingness to be on a pathway of growth, our capacity for growth and change, which we might be very able to shift and change and willing. And someone else might have willingness, but not the capacity but not actually willing. So those two things need to be there together, which is a good sort of litmus test to see, are they going to be on this pathway of growth? And the reason why the growth piece is important is because, yes, we want the pleasure, the connection, the company, all of those things. But if we're not growing, if we're not able to grow with the person, those will not be there. You won't be connecting. You won't be finding pleasure because you're not able to connect on and work through the things of exploring what brings you pleasure, what brings me pleasure, how can we meet in the middle? What do you want sexually? Am I open to hear what your sexual preferences even are? Willingness and capacity to change my behaviors, my habits that I might have formed in order to give you pleasure and for that to be reciprocal. So we can't get to those things without the growth. And the growth piece, because really it comes down to the universal mechanic that the overarching law of nature is that things are always evolving. So if we're not evolving, we're not in alignment, and relationships, if they don't evolve, will not last. And then we obviously won't get to, even if it's pleasurable now, it could be more pleasurable. And how will we know that? Because some crunchy point comes up. And this is where, with our resistance to growth, with our resistance to communication, maybe we're afraid to communicate, maybe we're afraid of being abandoned or losing the person, we don't see it as an opportunity to go deeper with that person and see what is their capacity to hear me out on this, to receive my vulnerability, to receive my desires and my fears and my insecurities in this moment with love and presence, and actually then their capacity to adjust to whatever extent is possible, or even just simply hear it. Maybe it's not something they can adjust on or want to, but they're happy to hear it. And sometimes in the being heard, that's enough. Or you get to see, ideally earlier on, hey, this piece isn't going to change, and am I okay with that? Sometimes you feel heard and you're like, actually, all I really needed was to be heard in it, but I understand why they can't give that if they have a valid reason, or it's a boundary for them, and I'm okay with it. Or actually, this is like a core value for me, and so now I know this information, which is a great gift, because even though this is going to end, I'm going to get to move on to something more aligned where I do get that need met.
I think one thing that has given me peace as I've cycled through, different people dating and stuff like that, is that if they've done something or I'm like, what the hell did they do that for? That didn't make sense to me, or or it's ended suddenly, or something like that. I've just said to myself, nature doesn't want me to waste my time.
Yeah.
And that's given me a bit of peace, because then it's like it sort of takes it away from who ended it or what happened or whatever. It's just like, that wasn't going to help me evolve in the way that I want to evolve, therefore it didn't need to be there, therefore it's over. But there is something that happens. It's hard, I think. You have to actively work sometimes not to feel the rejection of something if you've not been the one to end it. And, sometimes you can get trapped in that, like, oh, well, what is it about me that's not desirable or not enough or whatever? And it's such a trap, that part of it, because even when you look at that person objectively, and then you can actually identify the things where they didn't have the capability or the capacity or the willingness, or they weren't interested in growth, or you were changing yourself for them or something like that, you can still have that little niggle that's like,
definitely,
but why couldn't they see in me all of the wonderful qualities?
Yes. And on that point, when you feel like, why can't they see it, the solution is actually you're not seeing it yourself. Twist that back on yourself, because there is this universal mechanic, give that which you want to receive. So if you want to be seen, see yourself first. We're always trying to get it outside, and then we're going to be needy of it. And that's why that piece comes up and rears its head in that moment, is because actually you haven't acknowledged yourself. When you regularly acknowledge yourself, see yourself, which might just be as simple as taking a moment to really acknowledge all of the wonderful qualities that you have. When was the last time you did that? Yet you're waiting for it for someone outside. And you're there with yourself all the time. You're available to yourself 24 hours a day. So much easier to get it from self. And then it doesn't mean that we won't get it from another, but it's received in a different way, because we're not so desperate for it that we're like, give me more. And it's this never ending, when you're in a relationship with someone who's so needy, they want so much validation that it gets exhausting. Perhaps you've been that person where you were searching for it because of deep trauma where you didn't receive it earlier. You are searching for it so much from the other that they get tired, and they recognize that it's exhausting. They're not able to give it to the degree that you're wanting it, because it's a never-ending well. There's no self-sufficiency inside. So that is a really good opportunity to come back to yourself. Again, primary relationship with self. Secondary, when the relationship with other is secondary and you're really nourishing that inner relationship, the secondary relationship will be so much healthier. So you're not so needy of neediness in a relationship. It's already just talking about it. You feel like, it doesn't feel that good. It's a strain for the other person. And so when we're both taking care of that inner world, then we can just connect for joy and we're able to give compliments, we're able to give appreciation purely, not because we know the other person needs it or wants it in that moment. And it gets given freely and purely and received freely and purely without this, I need more on top of that, more and more and more. And so see yourself, acknowledge in the relationship what you brought to the table. Maybe there's some things you need to grow. We will all have areas, and it's good to review. What areas do I feel like this relationship showed me where I can become more expanded on this, where I can have a better relationship with another and with myself. It's always going to come back to the self. And then, but what did I bring here? I brought, and just acknowledge that for yourself. And when you're not even if you didn't get it from them, if you start acknowledging yourself, you'll find that you're more likely to meet someone who reflects that back to you because it's already lively in your awareness, which is self-compassion, self-honoring, championing yourself, accepting yourself. You're going to find a partner who reflects that because it's lively in you, which is they'll naturally accept you. They will naturally receive you. They will naturally champion you. And of course, as we get into more healthy relationships, those are the dynamics that we see showing up. But usually it's because we've cultivated them internally first, unless in some rare cases, that's less common, where they just happen to meet someone who was their healing pathway was with that person because that person just was very kind and lovely and evolved. But we're not always, if that's not showing up for us, then it's probably in most cases a signal that we need to do a little bit more work on the inner field. And if that rejection piece is there as well, we can't ever really be rejected when we know that we're at one with everything. If we think that we're separate to everything and this other person is glorified in our mind, we've over-glorified relationships, then we feel like I've been rejected by this person. But we can't be rejected by life. We can't be rejected by nature. We are that. We're connected to that. There's no way to be rejected. We're here in this moment. You and I are having this conversation in this moment. Our presence matters. Looking at, I watched this nature film recently where it's talking about the role of plankton, these tiny little forms. Yet if the plankton numbers go down, it starts this whole cascade through the entire ocean and then through every other layer of nature. So you think about one plankton. Now, if you're one plankton, you're like, I'm at the bottom of the food chain. What does my presence here really matter? I've been rejected. I'm not the big fish. I don't get to be a whale or a dolphin in this lifetime. Am I even making a difference?
So plankton needs to do some inner child work.
And yet, exactly, not seeing its own value. But, we're all here to offer something. We're all of value, just innate value. When we start to know our value as innate, just from existing, from being here, and that comes from having more of that vertical relationship, going in, connecting, feeling that connection with source, with baseline energy, we start to not be seeking it also externally. We start to have less of that idea that I need to go out and prove and get the love outside of myself and get the recognition and then I can't really be rejected. Now, when rejection naturally comes because so many people have trauma around that, it's just a call for more love, more self-love in that moment. Again, where can we get love 24 hours? From ourselves. So when we do that, we learn to nourish ourselves, to self-nurture, to self-soothe, to give love to those parts of ourselves that show up in those moments, the parts that didn't receive enough love growing up. Then they start to heal inside, and they start to be less active and show up less, and we jump less into our 5-year-old self and less into our 7-year-old self in a relationship. We're able to maintain more of the adult self online, more connection with inner self, and we can even be in an argument with a partner and soothing that inner child who's really active and is just like screaming for attention, rather than just being that and acting from that place. We can act from maturity, from adult self. We can speak to that part. I'm feeling this on the inside, which I know is kind of coming here and there, coming from here, and to have our partner kind of understand, oh, that's what's going on for you right now, and I can see that, and ideally hold space and empathy for that and give comfort to that, but also still maintain the conversation that needs to be had and deal with the issue at hand in a really mature way. So it really does always come back to the primacy of relationship with self, which I think is a big thing that's been missing, and we're sort of slowly getting there with understanding the need for self-regulation, with people pulling tools in and recognizing that they can easily become the worst version of themselves if they're not regulating, if they're not maintaining that primacy of relationship with self. What happens in a partnership where there are children and all the attention and energy goes to children, and there's no taking care of individuality, the individual people in this relationship, let alone the intimate partnership, that starts to fade. The connection starts to fade, and that can put a lot of pressure on a partnership or a marriage. If you're loving this knowledge and would like to tap in deeper, you'll love my on-demand advanced knowledge series, Self-Mastery. It's a combination of embodied techniques and knowledge to support you in unlocking deeper abundance, energetic intelligence, staying power, understanding how to clear your energetic system, and more. Take them in your own time, enjoy powerful breath, kriya, and mantra experiences, and take home bite-sized practices and the wisdom to unlock your next level of potential. Find out more at my website, gvmeditation.com, under Self-Mastery.
I think the other mistake I've enjoyed making on multiple occasions is when you're someone, everyone is viewing the world through the lens of their own experience.
Yeah.
Through, all of the experiences they've had, their experience of love and connection with others, the relationships that they've had, the traumas that they've got. And, you're looking out at the world and everybody in it through your lens. And it's been really easy to forget that everybody's lens is different. So the way that they experience the world and other people and you is different to what you're experiencing in them, or like how you're seeing them, or the potential that you can see. And I think I've I've definitely fallen for like a prince with potential on a number of occasions, and like being able to see past, what their issues are to what a beautiful soul that they are, and the potential that they've got, and overlaying my experience of the world and how I see people and my baseline values on other people, and accidentally, unconsciously assuming that everyone's coming from a similar space, but they're not.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think they can't even see you the way that you really are.
No, I think everyone will see and perceive the world based on their state of consciousness, and we're always projecting onto each other, which is why communicating is so important, and actually asking questions and speaking to what the truth of your experience is on the inside. And sometimes we need to show leadership in the relationship by being the one to start that conversation, being the one to share first, that creates the space for the other to share at a deeper level, because otherwise we're going to make assumptions based on our own experience. When it comes to choosing a partner consciously or being in a dating scenario, I always like to talk about it, and this is what is something I've had to learn through my own experiences, which is having the head and the heart online, both online, because the heart can be like, I just want to be loved, and this is a person that can love me and seems to be able to love me, and so I'll ignore what my head is saying, or I'm going to just get my checklist out and go from the head mental layer, and this person ticks this, and so I'm going to, now start strategically planning our relationship. So it's about having the heart connection needs to be there. It can't just be a mental connection, or it won't last either, and it's not as nourishing. But it also can't just be the heart. We can fall in love with all kinds of people, and we all have, and some of those relationships may not have ended up providing what we discover hoping for in the end, which is a nourishing, reciprocal, life-enhancing, aligned relationship over the long term. Because the heart was there and there were red flags. This is where the red flag piece comes in that we ignored, because we just mind be quiet. Heart's like, give me the love, So we have to really balance and be super conscious as we start to engage, paying attention. That thing that they said where we had a little bit of like, actually, what was that question mark? Ask about that. Ask questions, because if you're afraid to ask, why are you afraid to ask? It's because you don't want to find out that this person actually is not going to be great. It's not going to be someone who can give you the love. But if you ask about it, even if they're not honest, the lack of honesty will be revealing. You'll get more. Your intuition is going to give you more information. Or they clear it up for you, and that settles the mind, and then we can come back into the heart connection. So I think I've done both, where I've had a more head dominant relationship and got bored, and then had a more heart dominant relationship and got really hurt. So we can get hurt whenever things don't work out, but that was because there were things that were ignored on the basis of the heart connection being really strong. So that's why it's so key to have those two and to think about it like that, to consider, because sometimes you're like, well, to my head about this, then we need to see, well, is my heart feeling connected? Do I feel nourished? Even asking and checking in with yourself, what do I need to feel safe or to feel loved in a relationship? The answers might be different. When I asked myself that, the answer that came was a calm environment. And I was like, whoa, that is not what I was thinking of looking for in a partner, although it sort of seems obvious. But that's obviously something based on my nervous system, also how I'm showing up now, and what I experienced in childhood, which was not a calm environment. Is that my system really needs that. So that's a priority for me now, just revealed by my own self-inquiry of having a calm environment, which means I need to find someone who is already regulated. And I've also made the mistake in the past of I'm quite regulated, I'm very calm on the whole because of a lot of practice. I was like, well, I can be the regulated one. I can be the one that brings balance. But that's not actually nourishing to me in the long term, even though I can consistently harmonize the environment, which is just my natural way of being anyway. I don't want to have to do that all the time and to that degree. So now that showed me something, which I actually learned so much from that. So it's all having all of those pieces, knowing yourself quite well. And I think that's also the beauty of mature relationships, which is if you have come out of one or you've ended a long marriage or you haven't found a partner that you can be with over the long term till a little bit later in life, it's not a bad thing because you're so much more mature. You've learned so much. People coming out of divorce who have done the work, who have used that as a vehicle to learn more about themselves, which women primarily do very well. They go straight into, because they in a way take usually too much responsibility, which is that, oh, what's wrong with me and I need to heal myself. But they're also very, on the whole, again, making sweeping generalizations, but quite often more emotionally aware in that I need to really balance a lot of these things. So they'll tend to go down a pathway of healing and working on themselves. And then you're picking up a really great partner at that point that was not where they were at when they went into the first relationship. So that can be a real win too.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk about different types of connections because, you know, I've dated some people where when it ended, I was like, well, I feel nothing, you know. And then, you know, I've had relationships with other people where it's absolutely destroyed me in the end, and where the pull for that person and the connection to that person has been so deep and so profound, you know, to the level of like you both know when the other person is thinking of the other person because you can feel it. Like the connection is just so deep on so many levels. And those are the ones that tend to keep looping you back in or pulling you back in, or you can't, you know, you just almost feel like you're going insane because you can't fully let go. You can't stop thinking about it, you know. You think you're losing your mind. So like there's different qualities to different connections. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's sometimes where we can let go very easily and we just feel very clear and it feels very done and we can move on easily. And there's times where sometimes in their more shorter relationships which come in hard and fast and burn brightly and then sort of also just completely crash and burn, which would tend to say would be a karmic relationship. That deep karmic bond is there, which might have a flavour to it where you have this instant connection where it's kind of bang, where, you know, it's a bang straight at the start. It's not always necessarily a good thing. So sometimes when that connection is there, we can think, this is the one that I've been waiting for, and it's so deep and the connection's so strong. I would recommend bringing more consciousness online at that point, because sometimes why we're being brought together with that bang is because there's quite a lot of unfinished business there. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be relevant over the long term, but that maybe you've got something to teach each other, which could come through quite a painful lesson. But we sometimes learn more when it's very painful, when it's love and connection are on the line and we hurt a lot and we have to then do a lot of work afterwards to heal from that, we learn more from that in a way. So there's this contract of coming together to teach each other something over a period of time, which could be a few weeks or a few months. It doesn't even need to be a long relationship. And if we can see it through that lens, it makes a little bit more sense because the connection's so strong. Now, another lens to look at this would be a trauma bond, but the trauma bond is karmic ultimately. The primary source is karma, and then it's expressing through a trauma bond. But often with these trauma bonds is people will describe a sense of, I felt like I knew them, like there's a familiarity from the dynamic that can be there as well, but there can also be this deeper soul connection, because if you're going to heal from that dynamic through that person, then they're going to play a very important role in your life, as important as someone that you might spend a long time with after that in a more healthy dynamic, because you only got to that point because of this crash and burner. And if one of you might take the lesson and one may not. One may not have the willingness or capacity to really download what that person offered them, or they may end up changing as a result of that also because it really hurt them too. And each of you have played different roles within that, and the dynamic itself was hurtful, was painful, was toxic, let's say, was not life supporting and sustaining, and so it hit so deeply that it forced change, it forced reflection, it forced deeper work that you may not otherwise have done.
Okay, so say you do feel that deep connection with someone. You talk about like a karmic sort of contract or a trauma bond or something like that, where there's going to be a strong springboard for deeper evolution, which might not always be comfortable. Can you have that sense of, I feel like I've known you forever and it feels like a really deep connection and it's not going to be a painful, like heartbreaking lesson?
Sometimes, sure, but sometimes we might always have the consciousness there, which is there's a lot of red flags here. And even though, this is where we can evolve to, even though I'm feeling such a strong pull, I can maintain awareness of the red flags and actually choose not to engage in this dynamic. And recognize that strong pull is there. There's something that resonates with this person. It may be from another lifetime, potentially, but the relevance isn't here for this lifetime, because otherwise, why are these red flags here? So if we're ignoring the red flags, which when we look back on most of those connections,
we can always identify what they were.
Now, sometimes we're going to find it unavoidable that we'll be pulled into that, but that's because we haven't yet got to the point where we've learnt that lesson, and then we'll have to learn it the hard way. Or we can maintain the more conscious path, which is, if there's a strong connection and all the signs are green and it feels healthy and life enhancing and life supporting and aligned, those are the kind of words I like to think about potential partners, because connection alone, you can have a lot of different connections and they can be all different flavors as we've explored, but it is aligned, which is then, if it's aligned, that's going to rule out someone who might be wildly out of your age bracket, and you just know you're going to get to that point where they're going to be like, I want kids, and you're like, well, I can't give you kids, or there's a real sticking point on belief system, religion, or there could be the lifestyle's out of alignment with yours, and you know that they are going to want to party a lot and you don't really want to do that. Eventually you're going to hit a point. So if you allow yourself to get too involved, what you're doing is setting yourself up for suffering. So words like concepts like aligned, that's where we're getting to when we're getting a bit more mature and conscious about who we're engaging with, because then if we let the heart get online, then we're going to get hurt. That's going to be the net outcome. If it can't be aligned, it depends what degree of alignment is there and not, and you may need to discover that through asking the questions. Don't just assume that, no, that'll all be fine, it'll all come together. They might be like, oh no, absolutely not, I'm really into this. Or they might even say, no, I want to, because you can see, but you can feel they're saying it just to kind of please you, because they also want to be with you. They're also feeling the same thing on the other side, but the reality of how they're actually showing up right now, which is you talking about, falling in love with potential princes with potential, how they're showing up right now. Are you comfortable with that if they stay like that? Or otherwise you're looking for a project, not a partner. And
a project.
And that actually the responsibility falls on you. You're making the mistake of trying to take that project on. The bro doesn't want to be part of a project. Or a female project, whatever that version of that.
Whatever that version is.
They don't even know you're thinking of them that way. They want to be accepted for who they are like we want to. So also be ready to give that which you want to receive. So if you want to be accepted and you don't want to be a project that someone's working on and changing you to be what they want you to be, then you also can't be going into a relationship doing that subtly or otherwise through loving, controlling, as we call it. I love you so much that I'm going to control you into this because it'll be so good for you. And maybe it would be, but that's got to be their free choice, and they may not have the willingness and capacity for that. Willingness might be there, but they're not actually capable of getting to that, or they might have the capacity, but they're just not willing to change that at all. And so you're entering into something on shaky ground, which will only end up in crashing and burning. And how many crashes do we want to have? Once you really crash hard, you're like, okay, I need to take a lot more care with my heart as well. It's about loving yourself more deeply, that you're not actually going to put yourself through that situation by paying attention early on to the flags. The flags are there. They're flags. They're waving. That's why we call it that. But when the head and heart are online, when we have that enter with that kind of thinking as well, that awareness, then we're not going to ignore the flags, even if the heart connection is really, 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 really strong. And we might have to be the mature one, because the other person might be feeling that and not have that same level of awareness and be ready to kind of go into it. And we're saving ourselves so much suffering. So the connection, we can feel it and be aware of it and explore, is this, if it is aligned and expansive, then we can go ahead. But if there's a lot of other red flags there, then it's not probably going to be worth it.
Sometimes a question that I like to ask myself, if I need myself to be honest, is what are you choosing to remain ignorant of? Because that is a choice.
Totally.
If you don't want to allow your attention to rest on something long enough to realize what it might mean, that is a choice.
What are you avoiding thinking about in relation to this person? And immediately some things will pop up, and that will be very revealing.
But then also I think, sometimes you go through this process and you date someone until you realize that you don't want to be there anymore, and then you end it or whatever, and then you sort of get annoyed with yourself that you got into it anyway. But there's a degree where you need to do enough research to be able to make an informed decision, right?
Yes, but ideally we want to graduate from the research, not be repeating the same research again and again and again. Because if that is happening, then we're not really looking at the data that research provided. We're just in an endless research project, which is not getting us to the actual results of the survey.
So if you feel like you're repeating the same patterns, or you're dating the same person in different iterations,
then you're not paying attention, and there's an element of, there's something that needs healing still deeper in you, which would be the pathway, rather than, I would take some time away from relationships in that moment. And sometimes nature arranges it, and sometimes it's just through charm, and we consciously choose that to get therapy, to become more connected with self, and to really check in on why am I choosing this? These people can come into your awareness. So options get laid out, especially if you're online dating. There's so many options. You're going to see a whole range of people, much broader than if you're dating organically or just being in the world organically, much broader than that. So you don't need to think, I keep attracting them. And nature is presenting an opportunity for you to show that you've learned that lesson, which is, no, I'm not available for that kind of treatment anymore, that kind of dynamic anymore. And then you'll just discount them immediately, just so early on, before you even get past 2 or 3 messages. They've shown themselves and you're out. So you've saved time, you've saved yourself suffering, you're free and available for someone who is aligned, rather than spending lots of time in unaligned dynamics, which aren't, again, if we're really have a few words of what we're really looking for rather than just any connection. Pleasure alone can lead to a lot of suffering. Shared experience alone without other things, without alignment, is not going to bring true lasting joy and satisfaction either. So if we've got those words and concepts that what we're really looking for online, aligned, enhancing my life, because if you're really satisfied and happy in your own life, you don't really need anything. So you're only going to be in a partnership with someone who is enhancing that, and they're going to need to be of a pretty high caliber to enhance something that's already really great. Because if they're not enhancing, then they're detracting. There really isn't a middle ground. They're enhancing in lots of different ways, which could be, beautiful shared connection, pleasure, conversation, enjoyment, intellectual connections, sparking great conversations, all of those things. Or they're detracting, which means you feel drained, you're anxious, they're criticizing you, feel less of yourself, you feel smaller, your confidence is going down, you're not doing the things that you really love because now you're spending all your time with them doing what they want to do. You're moving away from your dharma, your purpose in life, because you're spending all this time trying to fix problems, dynamics, lots of fighting, lots of talking through things. And there's a limit to the relevance of that also, especially if it's taking you away from your dharma being your primary purpose in life, what you're here to do and give and serve and offer, and the way that you express that in different ways. Then, like, for example, if you're a parent, your parenting is going down because you're spending so much time worrying about the relationship or being upset by what the person is doing, then it's out of alignment. If you're not able to work to your normal capacity and offer your gifts and skills and abilities, this person, if they're in your life, should be enhancing that, supporting you, giving you great ideas, giving you a sounding board to talk through things, championing you and what you're doing, rather than detracting, negging out on it, constantly criticizing or playing some kind of power dynamic where they're jealous of what you're achieving or the way that you're showing up, and so they're make it all about them with some dramatic thing, or they've got so much going on in their life, so much karma that's there, that you spend your whole time supporting them and looking after them and, talking on and on about the different problems that they have, and your life is suddenly becoming small in favor of their life. These are all signs that is not in alignment, because it should be enhancing, which means it will enhance your dharma, support you more deeply to be in dharma, not take you away from that. So, if that's happening, then that is a sign again. So we want to have aligned, enhancing those qualities there, looking for those things. And if they're not there, then we're equally happy because we've healed ourselves. We're enjoying that deep connection with self, enjoying taking ourselves out for dinner. I was talking to someone who had lost their husband and was finding it really hard to go out to dinner by themselves. And, I was like, I've been doing that for 10 years, And is it a massive adjustment after you lose someone and you're used to that? Yes. But also there can be, life has arranged this chapter for you for something else where you get to, maybe you missed out on that deeper relationship with self because you were in a relationship really early and your soul chose this pathway, knew the timeline was coming, which was that a partner would come and you'd get all these wonderful years together, however many they are. If it was such a beautiful relationship, that's a real gift. Not everyone has that. So however long that relationship was for, you got this beautiful period with this person, and then you also got this second chapter on your own through whichever mechanism that comes. It could be divorce or it could be death. Nothing lasts forever. Bodies don't, relationships don't. And so if one does outlive the other, then there is a purpose to that. We can get a little bit stuck on holding on to wanting them to still be there. We haven't really let go of the idea that the expectation that they would be there right till the end, till death do us part. Not always, well, certainly that there's may have been death of one, so the parting is there, but then it was meant to be. Your soul chose that, to have this period of time where you got to explore some things that you would never have done in partnership with that person necessarily, or not gone as deep. And so there's an opportunity there if we can allow ourselves to see it.
Do we have people that are destined to be in partnership with us? Like, are there particular souls that are just supposed to be part of our journey, or do we get offered potential options along the way?
There's some that you definitely won't miss. That, you know, that timeline is, you know, really going to line up, and they'll be very important relationships in your life, and that's partly why you got together with them in the first place. Like, when you think about all the circumstances that have to conspire for you to meet someone, particularly before the time of online dating, but even in the online world, you need to be on that app, see their profile, actually like it, get through all the barriers that there are within those settings to get there. But in IRL, in real life, all the forces of nature have to conspire for you two to be together at that point in time, and both mutually attracted. What is that attractive force? It's nature's intelligence. But again, we get to a more evolved place where we're also able to take into account red flags and make a conscious choice, that we learn from some of the relationships that didn't then prove to be enhancing and aligned.
Okay. So when they say, you know, what is meant for you won't pass you by.
Exactly.
There
you
is
know,
truth
and
to
that lesson may be what's meant for you.
Yeah, I think sometimes that's where you can get confused, that you assume what the outcome and the purpose of that connection is going to be.
You're projecting your Disney fantasy onto every potential connection rather than paying attention to what is actually happening.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so what about, like, say you are in a long-term relationship that is relevant for you to continue to be in, that feels like it's providing growth and evolution and is life enhancing. How do you keep them interesting?
You know, when we're in a long-term relationship, for it to be relevant and to continue over the long term, it needs to be evolving. So that means that we want to have this idea of change being dominant in the relationship. Often we resist change. We just want to get really comfortable and keep things as they are. And people will say things like, oh, just wish it could stay the same, or I wish we could get back to that place. But life is going to come along, and different dynamics and circumstances are going to come along, and you are evolving as individuals. So it's a case of meeting each other at the next evolution. And so that's going to it's going to need to involve a lot of communicating and sharing about what is the truth of my inner world? What am I really experiencing, desiring, noticing, preferring or not preferring in our dynamic and in life at this point? And if it's meant to be relevant over the long term, you'll continue to meet each other, and it may take adaptation, may take surrender, it may take letting go of a preference that you had for someone to continue, let's say, doing something for you all the time, and they say, hey, what have you been doing? I've been doing all the stuff and you're not really lifting your weight. Now, of course, your preference is that they'll just keep doing it for you. Wouldn't that be great? So you have to let go of that in favor of their happiness and recognizing that it's not in balance. So we have this concept, a Vedic concept of the 3 laws of nature: creation, maintenance, and destruction, or removal of irrelevance. And the 3 are relevant. The 3 are operating all the time. In the context of a relationship, maintenance will be there. The parts of the relationship itself is being maintained over the long term to the degree it's relevant. We've got creation, which is what the parts of the relationship that are going through evolution, the changes that are happening, what we're creating that's new, what we're doing that's different, anything that's involving changes in that creation bucket. And then there's destruction will be there, things that need to evolve, things that need to be let go of, things that are no longer relevant. How you interacted in your 20s, if you've been together a long time, is not going to be relevant when you're in your 30s and 40s. There's going to need to be a different dynamic. You're not now just going out together every night of the week and out with friends all the time. You have children, and there's responsibilities, and going through perimenopause, and that's a big shift for you, or your partner is going through a particularly intensive work period, or something's coming up for them in their family. There's change all the time. So the mistake that we make is thinking that we want to be maintenance dominant, trying to maintain, keeping everything the same. But because nature wants things to evolve all the time, when we over-maintain and keep the dynamic the same, and it gets a bit stagnant. So this is why people start to feel, I'm getting a bit, this is feeling boring, or I'm tired of this. It's because it was over-maintained. The more we maintain something, it's going to attract destruction, because the destruction will remove that which is not relevant, where there were signals for us to let go of that. And if we'd been proactive and moved into change and creation earlier, then we wouldn't have attracted that destructive force, because we've already moved, we've already changed it. No need for any kind of destructive force to come through. And destructive force just means it might get to the point where it's feeling really crunchy. People are really upset, really angry, really resentful. If we look at some of those kind of stereotypical relationships of previous generations where there was very little communication, they tried to just maintain the dynamic and pretend everything was fine and everything was kept under the carpet. What happens is lots of resentment, and then they just kind of hate each other, and they either get divorced or they stay together kind of hating each other, living, separate lives, or just it's not a healthy dynamic. There's not really any love there anymore. So that's what happens if we over-maintain versus switching it around in our thinking and understanding. And when we understand these mechanics, we can really look for what's showing up in our relationship and be proactive about how to respond to it. So if something's coming up where there's a little bit of friction, this is nature calling for change around that dynamic. It doesn't mean that the relationship needs to end, although it's more likely to end if we don't address it. So our idea of let's brush it under the carpet and kind of maintain the harmony and not get into conflict, over-maintain is more likely to bring destruction to the relationship than leaning in for the growth. This is an opportunity for some changes required here. It might be schedules, it might be levels of responsibility, it might be roles, it might be one's been carrying too much of a load, this needs to shift. It might be that we've ignored each other and our romantic relationship needs some attention. We need to tend to the relationship like a garden. And I think that what I see is people spend so much time focused on what money they're making, their job, how they're seen in society, their children, and the relationship is getting the least amount of attention in all of those buckets. And then when it is such a foundational piece, if it's working, it's designed to create a strong foundation for the children, to support you to go out and create and earn and create resources, to support you in your work, to support you in the parenting. But if we don't tend to it, it's just like a garden. It's going to get overgrown, and then, you're like, oh, it's so bad, we've got to sell it. Like, there's just no coming back from this. We're going to burn it to the ground. Now, there's even a possibility at that point, if you burn everything down and rebuild completely from a crash and burn scenario, well, there's going to be a lot of fresh, entirely new growth, and sometimes that does work for people. So the key from a understanding the universal mechanics point of view, and then, what is our capacity to embody and implement that, is being creation dominant, leaning in for change, consistently rising to meet those changes, rising to explore what's arising with you, and you checking in with your partner if they haven't shared with you for a while. And sometimes it requires scheduling because life gets busy. So again, instead of just letting it all happen and hoping for the best, which was sort of many previous generations' attitude to relationships, partnership, marriage, shouldn't it just all go well by itself? We don't need to pay any attention to this. But conscious attention is very nourishing. Where attention goes, energy flows. So if we put attention on the relationship itself, then we can nourish it. It's nourishing. It grows. It's like a fire. You put a few more logs on, it starts burning brightly again. If everyone's turned away and not throwing any logs on the fire, then it's going to die down. So if one person's just putting logs on the fire, one side is dying down, it's becoming imbalanced. So even understanding these mechanics can be so supportive in just the way that we even think about relationships, the way that we approach it, the way we approach there being some friction as rather than there being a problem. Oh no, there's something going wrong and I'm so scared of losing this person, or abandonment that I don't want to even address it, but rather, this is an opportunity for us to go deeper. So of course that's going to happen if we're really paying attention, because that's the whole purpose, as we said at the start of all of this, is actually for it to be a growth vehicle, a vehicle to deepen relationship, more intimacy, deeper level of understanding. If we really explore and we're willing to go there and be really vulnerable and share that difficult thing that's weighing on us that feels so scary to say, but then to have someone receive it, it can be this deep healing moment of love and acceptance that you're not going to get anywhere else, because it's only in that intimate partnership that you're really going to go there on that.
What about for those that don't end up in a partnership that they find ultimately satisfying, that they want to continue with? You know, like, to what degree can being in a relationship with yourself be, like, you know, what if you don't get to experience that? What if you never get the partnership that is fulfilling?
Then you are enriching the primary relationship. Primary relationship is with self. There's this idea that single people are supposed to be living miserable, unfulfilled lives because they don't have the Prince Charming or the Princess Charming. And it's just a fallacy that we're buying into. It's very possible to live a very fulfilling, enriched, happy life on your own if you allow it. But you're not allowing it generally because of all the societal conditioning, where you're allowing these ideas that I must not be good enough, I've done something wrong, I'm not doing enough, I'm not enough, I've made too many mistakes, or I'm not lovable, basically, and I'm not worthy in society as a result of not being in a relationship. Or it would be, like I mentioned before, better if someone was here, rather than being in full receptivity to what is showing up in your life now. We can't have this understanding and knowing that everything's happening for a reason and nature is really organizing for us the highest level of experience, but not when this is happening, and also not in this circumstance. It's universal. It applies all of the time. If we're finding that it's harder in a particular scenario, like say we've been single a long time and it's not showing up for us, if we're finding that, then it's because it's going to take us a little bit more work to get to that point where we can really enliven that primary relationship and really find it deeply enriching and have deleted the programming. But if you delete that programming, you're really advancing your consciousness, because that is so expansive, and it's been so expansive for me. And I've broken through a lot of programming within myself about my own worth, which of course is about love. It's about self-love. It's all about connection. But I've done it in the absence of a partner, because it's obviously most relevant for me at this particular point in time, though I'm sure I'll be in relationship with another human because I'm relating all the time in so many different ways. I'm sure I will be in relationship again, but I'm just relaxed and enjoying, and that's my preference. It's my desire, but it's not, I'm not gripping onto needing that at the expense of my experience now. And that's the difference. The attachment isn't there. And that has been a great gift, because I get to really enjoy all the time that I get to do whatever I want to do. In relationship, we have to be surrendering preference. So this idea that we both have a preference at a particular point in time, to have shared experience, we've got to, one has to surrender preference if they don't match up. And the idea is that it's generally reciprocal, roughly even. Sometimes I surrender my preference for pizza so that we can have Italian that my partner loves, or I surrender my preference for a rom-com to watch the action films that my partner loves, or I watch the superhero movie which I really don't enjoy because my partner does, and I want to sit with them and watch a movie. I don't want to be watching it by myself. But if we don't want to surrender preference, then we be on our own. No surrender of preference. And that's also a joyful experience, just the freedom and joy of doing whatever you want, whenever you want, with no surrender of preference. It's enjoyable. Let's enjoy that, not cut off the enjoyment of whatever is showing up for us in life. We may have challenging circumstances in areas of life, but if we don't let them dominate by being able to open to what else might be might be there to be experienced, but we're hyper focusing on one thing, that I don't have the partner. And this can be really binding for people. I don't have a partner, I'm not getting a partner, it's not showing up for me. It becomes almost a haunting or a desperation. We don't like to think of ourselves as desperate, but if it's taking up a lot of time in your mind or awareness, then it is becoming a little bit like that. And rightfully so, because of course we are looking for connection naturally, but what we're missing is the opportunity to go deeper. And so I would recommend, if that's you, seek out a mentor, get a practice, and really start to use this time to go deeper with yourself and open up in that space and see what comes and ask the question, which I think is a relevant question anytime. Okay, if this is my circumstance right now, it must be by cosmic design, because that same intelligence that has right now 70 trillion cellular processes going on in your body that you're not mentally controlling, that has the planets circling the sun in just the right distances, at the right speed, at the right time, so they don't crash into each other, that holds this whole universe together. That same unbelievable infinite creative intelligence is not wrong about this. So that means what is needed is surrender of individual control, individual perception of control, and to open to ask the question, if this is relevant, then what is this time for? What am I learning right now? What is here for me to enjoy right now? How can I go deeper? How can I enjoy more, even without this one thing that I do have a preference for? I do desire. We don't need to pretend, oh no, I don't need it, I don't want it, I'm totally fine. No, you're not. You do desire it. The desire is there, but it doesn't need to dominate. It can just be faint in the background that, yes, acknowledgement, yes, the desire is there, yes, that's my preference. But I'm also not going to cut myself off from experiencing all that is to be experienced here without that. And what is cutting me off from that? What are the little viruses going around in my mind? This is my opportunity to correct that, and that will ultimately be a very profound, expansive journey.
Beautiful. Thank you. I think that's a beautiful place to finish. Do you?
Yeah, so unbound on relationships, singledom.
So unbound.
So
I think that was my last question I was going to ask, is that, like, even though, I feel like I've got to a place where I'm really comfortable when I'm single, and I'm really can give myself good company and feel a great sense of contentment when I'm single. There, is it still okay to want the experience of a really healthy partnership?
Of course.
Because and so I'm glad that you said that you can acknowledge that the desire is there, and that it's okay for the desire to be there. Because sometimes I feel like you can make yourself wrong by still having that sense of wanting.
Yeah, it's just how strong is the wanting, because we don't want it to cause suffering. So if we're bound by that desire, which is becoming more of a need, really, than a desire, just a pure desire is there, we don't have the needy, grippy part. If it's becoming grippy, then we need to do more practices in letting go and opening to our wider, richer experience that's there beyond that need. And so letting it be a preference, a desire, a faint desire, rather than dominating the experience. When it's dominating, it's going to cause suffering. So that's what we want to tune into.
Great. Thank you.
Unbound on relationships.
Now untick. Now unbound relationships.
Thanks, Anna, for being here.
Thanks, Georgia. It's so much fun.
Thanks for getting unbound with us today. We'd so appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave us a review and to share this episode with anyone who you think could benefit. It helps us to keep these conscious conversations flowing. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. See you next week.